we go in order, do we have to sit in order? We don't have to sit in order. You can sit wherever you want. Sit wherever you want. I'm over here.
Should we sit so very on the end?
All right. Greetings, everyone.
Put him over there.
I was going to sit there, but if you want to
We're going to get started.
And then you go there.
Okay, good.
My name's Howie Bierbaum. I'm the Executive Director of the Eastside Jewish Commons. Thank you for coming tonight. A few words. Coming up Monday night, May 15th at 7 p.m., we're going to have a talk on Jews, prison, and spirituality with Lane Leader. That's Monday night at 7. You can check that out at ejcpdx.org, and you can. It's free. You can just register there like you registered for tonight's symposium. Tonight, we have It Won't Kill You to Talk About Death, ! With Rabbi Ariel Stone, Rabbi Eve Posen, Rabbi Abby Cohen, and Rabbi Barry Cohen. First up will be Rabbi Ariel Stone, who will be talking about ethical wills and preparing. So the way the night will run is we'll have the panel talk for about 45 to an hour, and then we'll open up the floor to Q&A for any questions you might have. So, Rabbi Stone, it's all yours.
Without any further ado, hi, y'all. Am I on? Thanks, Mervyn. Do I have to do something? Push that button. I have to push a little button that says on. Welcome, y'all. Glad you could be here. There's only two things in my line of work that keep people away from shul, and one is bad weather and one is good weather. So you get credit for showing up for a heavy topic on a brilliantly cheerful day. So there's something you need to know about life. None of us is getting out of here alive, right? Sooner or later, everybody dies, but nobody wants to think about it. We are created to imagine that we can go on, and our imagination can see us going on, and our force of will imagines us going on. And so, when is the right time to start considering what your life means and how to sum it up? Years ago, I got a Lifetime Achievement Award, and I was taken aback. I was too young to get a Lifetime Achievement Award. Call it a warning shot across the bow that you might achieve more things, but it's time to start thinking about who you are, what you've done, and what you meant to do. So what I want to talk about to get us started, and somebody is going to keep track of the time, or am I? How long are each of us speaking for? 10 to 15. Okay, so we started just now. Like just a minute ago.
By the way, you know the trick. The timer starts for rabbis when they put their watch down.
Right, yeah. The other joke about rabbis is they can't even say hello in 15 minutes, right? So if all of us are born according to the Jewish Midrash without anybody asking our permission, you are born. Without anybody asking your permission, you will live. And without anybody asking your permission, you will die. Not according to your timetable and not in the way you might choose, because these things are not under our control. Yet we make choices all the time. And when we have a chance to think about it, it might be said that there is some sense of a thread or a theme that we are living by. What's your life's motto? What's your bucket list? Are some ways we might think about it. What are the things you want to make sure you do? One way to think about this is something that some of us get an opportunity to do, and not enough of us. And that is the invitation to write a spiritual autobiography. What would you write if you had that assignment? What would you say? Where would you start? What would be the theme? What would be your way of explaining what did you mean by the way you lived your life? Now, I'm not saying that we go through our lives acutely aware at every moment that we are defining our lives by our choices, but in retrospect, that's exactly what you did. Doesn't matter what you meant unless it comes through in some way. How do Jews measure their days, as we are told we should measure our days, or as we chant at every Yizkor, teach us to measure our days, that we might get a heart of wisdom? So we go back, all the way back, to the patriarch Jacob, who on his deathbed called his children and said to them, "Come together, that I might tell you what is to befall you in the days to come." Can you imagine what it might be like to be attending an aged parent at a deathbed and have them say, "Come sit with me so I can tell you what's going to happen to you in the days to come"? And so according to the story, Jacob's children gathered around him, and one of the things that he said to them was, "I beg you to bury me with my ancestors." I know a man who told me that after his parents died, he chose to save the money it would have cost to do what they wanted him to do with their remains, and to use it in a different way. Was that okay, Rabbi? There's something called chesed shel emet, which Jacob actually asked for at the moment when he was dying. Do with me the kindness of absolute loyalty, and do as I ask you with my remains. Don't bury me here, bury me with my ancestors. What does it mean to be buried with your ancestors? If not to somehow connect with all those who came before you, and to manifest that connection in the way you die. What could it possibly mean if Jacob's sons had not done what his father asked him to do? Over the centuries, over the millennia, I should say, if we count from Jacob, the practice of gathering one's children by one's bedside to share with them one's final thoughts, prayers, wishes, predictions, has been called among our people a tzva'ah, an ethical will. A couple of years ago, I was very proud to see that the New York Times did a whole article on how the ethical will, which has long been a Jewish practice, is now becoming the latest thing. So you can now be part of the latest thing. We made it. There are ethical wills that I won't go into in depth, but from people, from Jews from many, many different places. One of them saying, "My children, chiefly occupy yourself with Torah, with learning, and avenge yourself on an enemy by increasing your own good qualities." That was an ethical will that somebody wrote, trying to express what they wanted their children to know about what was important in their own life and what they hoped that their children would take with them. So what's an ethical will? It's not, well, a regular will, which is a very important thing, is where you write down where you want the things you own to go after you die. And it's very important to have one of those at every age, especially if you have children or any assets at all that you don't want to just go floating off into the ether and be bitten away by taxes and fees. I just heard today a wonderful statement. Not having a will is dangerous to your health and your wealth. But your assets are not only material things, they're also the wisdom you've heaped up from your own mistakes, your own experiments, your own adventures, and your own learning. So Eliezer of Mayence, Germany, in the 14th century writes, always conduct your business honorably in your dealings both with Jew and Gentile, which is pretty impressive at a time when Gentiles were not very nice to Jews. You can choose to try to hit a higher rung, no matter how you're being treated. Oh, and by the way, you should also be sure to donate regularly to, well, they call it tithe. Don't turn a poor person away empty-handed. Don't judge why they're poor. Live in communities and not isolated from other Jews. Don't let the young of either gender go without instruction in Torah. What would be in your list of advice, the wisdom you've accumulated, for those you will leave behind when you die? Let's spread the net a little further. What if you don't have children of your own? I don't. But I, by God, have stuff I want to pass on. An ethical will is not only for children of one's body any more than a will of one's assets is. The will of one's assets benefits those who come after one as you choose to whom you will bestow. Don't underestimate how important it is to leave behind you an indication, a treasure of what you learned and what you meant by how you lived. Glickle of Hamlin, some of you may know that she was a woman who lived in the 16 to 1700s, whose memoir was the first of its kind among Jewish women, for sure. Glickle of Hamlin. She writes, among the things that she wants those around her to know after she's gone, naked were we born, and naked we must depart. No matter what you may lose, be patient, for nothing belongs. It is only lent. The best thing for you, my children, she wrote, is to serve God from your heart, without falsehood or shame, not giving out to people that you are one thing while, God forbid, in your heart you are another. Finally, Aaron Leverant wrote on the 3rd of March, 1943, in a cattle car destined for Majdanek, I hope, my child, that you will know how to behave as a free person, even though you are without your parents for now. Don't forget that you must survive, and don't forget to be a Jew and a human being. Don't be influenced by first impressions. Know that you cannot open up a person to look inside at his concealed thoughts. If he has a serious face, or even if he laughs and is pleasant, it doesn't mean one specific thing only. You should watch how a person behaves in your presence. You don't see the falsehoods or the honesty of a person in one day. My dear child, I think this letter will be my last. If I can, I will write again. Take care of your health. Don't drink cold drinks when you sweat. So I will be able to see my healthy children once again. Tell your brother everything I have written you. Tell him to study and be a good student, because he is gifted. Many kisses. I am going with confidence that you will grow up and be a good, healthy, and smart girl. Your father, hoping to see you soon. From Yad Vashem, last letters. We don't know what will be the meaning or the ultimate value of what our lives mean But we do know that unless we care to take the time to share them, too much will be lost. Death takes so much. Let's not give it any more than it should.
Is it on? Okay. All right. Well, it's hard to follow that. I don't even know what to say, but we're going to bring it down to a super practical level for just a little while. I'm Rabbi Abby Cohen, and I work as a chaplain with a specialty in palliative care. And most of the patients that I see have a year or less to live, sometimes much less to live. And one of the things that we always try to find when we meet a patient is this, an advance directive. This is an Oregon advance directive, and it's a different kind of ethical will. It tells, first and foremost, if you were ever too sick to tell the doctors or your family what kind of medical care you would or wouldn't want, who would you want to make that decision for you? And unfortunately, people get dementia, people fall into comas, people are intubated, people are in medical situations where they cannot speak for themselves. So everyone, really, if you're driver's age or over, this is not just for old people, should fill out an advance directive. And in the beginning, what it asks for is who you would want to make these decisions for you. And there are spaces for 3 people. And you can add more if you would like. And then there are questions about your health care. And I always like to make it really easy for people. You do not have to answer them if you don't know or you don't want to. There are things like, if I want certain kinds of treatments, I want treatments if I am at the point of not being able to communicate, do I want this or that? You may know, but you may not know, and that's okay. But please do find who you trust to make those decisions if you can't, and let us know who they are. There is also an opportunity here for you to put up things about your values. You can share things about your spiritual life. It is not as elaborate as an ethical will, but there are opportunities for you to say, I want a Jewish burial. I want my body to be washed and prepared according to Jewish ritual. You can put that in here as well. This is not, by the way, something that you may have seen, a post form, which is a pink form that some people have on their fridge, and now it's electronic. And I want to tell you what the difference is. A post form is for somebody who has a serious illness. It's not for everybody, really. And what it is it's a super short instruction of what kind of medical care a person would want if the EMTs come. You know, do you want to go to the hospital? Do you want to be resuscitated? Things like that. And that goes into an electronic database at OHSU. If you are not seriously ill, you do not need that right now, okay? You can always do it, nobody will stop you. But this is super important, really, for everybody. It's also important that you not just fill this out, but that it be witnessed or notarized, and then you give it to your PCP so that they can put it into the system so that if, God forbid, you ended up in the hospital or you were in another state or you were somewhere else, people would be able to find this document and know who to call. I cannot tell you how often in the hospital we have people, especially with dementia, who cannot tell us, and we don't know who their family is. And we have to become detectives when what we should be doing is caring for these people. So it's super important, not just that you fill this out, not just that you get it signed or notarized, witnessed, but that you turn it over not just to your PCP, but also to the people who are your healthcare representatives who need to sign this as well. That you spread it around, let people know that you've done this and where it is. And please also talk to your loved ones and tell them what your wishes are. Don't just put it on paper. Because I can't tell you how often I sit with families and one child will say, well, Mom told me she would never want that. And the other child will say, but of course she wanted that. She told me do everything, do anything you can. So again, it's really good to have this, and it's really good to have everyone able to see it. I brought about 20, which are in the front, but you can download this. All you have to do is Google Oregon Advance Directive, and you'll get it. It's really not complicated to fill out, and it's 11 pages, but the type is large. So, it is. It's not a lot. So that is my advice, and that is my hope that you will do this. I've got one. I hope everybody sitting at this table has one. Yeah, it's important. And you can always change it. That's the other thing. If you change your mind or you change who you trust, you can always change it. Nothing is written in stone. Rabbi Stone. Okay. Thank you, guys.
I just had to sit between the Rabbis Cohen, so you're next.
Oh, and there's no relation.
No, not at all. That's why you have an Israel. You have an Israelite in between you.
Yeah.
Posen.
Okay, is this on? Okay. Well, what I'm going to present, again, obviously we're covering a lot of aspects of, what is it to die, how to prepare, and then, of course, we have to consider what is the nature of burial options, okay? And I imagine that in this room, you've picked up a lot of information. You've learned a lot of traditions, a lot of approaches. Some of it would be formally based in halakha. Some of it may not. But I can give a plug to Ariel Stone's book.
Which is displayed in the back.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I think I turned myself off.
Right.
Which is displayed in the back so that anybody who wants to can take a photo and find it at Broadway Books or order it
Right.
online.
So if you think you know what halakha is, what Jewish law is, think again. It gets much more complicated and nuanced because we've been around a long time. And we've lived in a lot of societies, in a lot of parts of the world, a lot of geographic areas. So what you may think is, quote, traditional or halakhic, there are a lot more options on the table, okay? A lot of times we're asked, what's the right way to do it? I try to reframe that conversation. There are many right ways of burial options, okay? And again, whatever Q&A afterwards, I'm curious as to how you may respond to this. The first option that you have is, if you want to choose a more conventional burial, is how do you want the body of your loved one, or how do you want, if you're the one passing away, how do you want the body to be prepared? Okay, and the other Rabbi Cohen, talked about the ritual washing, tahara. It's a way of showing dignity to the body. Okay, and there are two organizations in town that you can look to. There's Chevra Kavod Hamet, and then there's the Portland Chevra Kadisha. The Portland Chevra Kadisha is Orthodox affiliated. And the Chevra Kavod Hamet, that's
for the rest of us.
everyone else. Everyone else, as Jewish tradition continues to evolve. So you have the option of having your body ritually washed. You have the option of shemirah, of always having someone with you, whether in person or even virtually, that we went through with COVID. Backing up a little further, if money is an is and you're worried about how do I even afford this in the first place, there's Chesed Shel Emet. It's an organization that it's a wonderful organization which makes sure that everybody can have a dignified burial, regardless of whether you can afford it or not. We take care of our own. Okay, it's very crucial. We take care of our own. If you're talking about a conventional burial, then the question is, okay, what about the casket? Okay, what is that going to look like? A lot of this comes down to how much money do you want to spend? Look, it's economics. It's economics, all right? You can spend something reasonable, or you can spend thousands and thousands of dollars for a casket, okay? As far as how you are placed in that casket, part of the preparation of the body is to be ritually shrouded in tachrichim. Again, it's a way to show dignity to the person who's passed away, but it's also a way to democratize. In many ways, we're all equal in death. Okay? Again, these are options. If it speaks to you, again, write it down, tell your loved one, be very clear, be very, very, very direct. Okay? I'm learning as I go. I've only been out here for about 5 years. I don't know if every cemetery even requires a casket.
Nope.
Exactly.
Nope.
Exactly.
We do green burial.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get to green burial. Yeah, I'll definitely get to that. So again, you don't have to choose a casket if you do not want to. Okay? If you're more traditional, or I don't even want to say traditional, if it's your choice, you could also be buried in your talus. Okay? But if a very intriguing ritual is performed, one of the fringes is cut off. And the question is why? The answer is that in death, no one is bound by Jewish law anymore. Okay? So that's why one of the ends of the talus is cut off. Another question, how long do you have to wait between when you pass away and when the burial actually takes place? Okay? Again, that is up to your unique family situation. Okay? If possible, you try to have the funeral as quickly as possible, but sometimes that's not, you just can't do it. People have to travel in from out of town. Okay? So really, it's up to whatever reality is, whatever the constraints are about the amount of time between one passes away and when one is interned. All right? Something that's intriguing that's going on lately is that there is less, it seems there's less attention for some families on the actual internment, the actual burial, and more attention placed upon can as many people as possible get together at a later date, whether in person or virtually, to have more of a memorial service, right? So again, that's up to whatever your unique family situation may be or whatever your wishes are, okay? But again, that's just another option that's on the table about how you want to commemorate this crucial event, okay? Another question, if you do a conventional burial, where is it going to be? Okay? A lot of people want it to be in a cemetery, a Jewish cemetery, okay? But you don't have to do that, okay? You could, in Oregon, you can be buried anywhere. I mean, you could be buried on private property.
Really?
On private property. Yeah, but you have to note it.
In New York City, they can throw you off a bridge.
Right.
Well, now I'm planning.
I wouldn't
something.
recommend that. And this is just me speaking. I don't want to be thrown. I wouldn't.
Well,
want to be
actually,
thrown off a
just your
bridge.
cremains.
Right. And we'll get to that, by the way. We'll definitely get to that. If you want to be buried in, say your family has owned a piece of property for generations, and you want to be buried in the backyard by a certain tree, you can do that. However, you must note it, because in the reality that property would be sold, anyone that buys that property needs to know that a burial is taking place.
Oh, you'd be like
Okay.
digging up a new garden.
Yeah.
No.
So again, options. Okay. Another option is if you do a conventional burial or a burial in your home, is you can you can purchase land or a packet of earth from the land of Israel. Okay? And that, in effect, links the sacred, either a sacred cemetery or a sacred location where you're buried with the sacred land of Israel. Again, interconnectedness. And that can add meaning and purpose and significance to where you are buried. Okay. That's more the conventional approach. Let's deal with a little more unconventional options. Cremation is coming up more and more and more. Okay? That is obviously an option, but you really need to think through this. Think through this. And the reason I say that is, number one, how are the cremains going to be handled? Are they going to be divided up among family members? Does the person that passed away want them to be spread in, out in their favorite place outside, a park, wherever it may be? Again, you need to leave behind instructions. Okay, it's heartbreaking when the cremains end up on the top shelf of the garage.
Unless you like to be in the garage.
Well, usually you don't want to end up on the top shelf of the garage, if I can speak for people who have already died. But would you want to be in the top shelf of a garage?
I wouldn't, but somebody who likes to work in the garage might.
Okay, then leave instructions, and that way it won't be next.
you.
It won't be next to the WD-40 and a bunch of like screws and hammers and wrenches. Okay. If you want your cremains to be returned to the earth, leave your instructions behind on how you want that to be done. You can bury them, by the way. You can bury them in depending upon the rules and regulations of a cemetery. You can bury the cremains. Usually they just have to be in some kind of a box. Okay? My dad was always contrarian. He wanted to be cremated, but he's buried in the family plot in Memphis, Tennessee, in a box that's about that big. Okay? A challenge of cremation, and this, I'm getting graphic here, and this is just something you got to think about. Before you just choose cremation, a lot of people do that thinking that it's more economical. Maybe yes, maybe no. Cremation is an inherently violent act. Okay? It consumes a lot of fuel, and the body is in very, very high heat, literally broken down. And it can be loud. It can be jarring if you're actually there to witness it. Something else that is concerning is that it is a source of pollution. Depending upon if you have metal fillings in your teeth or a metal, a bone
Plate.
a plate or whatever it may be.
Joint.
It's in the environment now. It burns out. So cremation can really add a lot of pollution to the environment. So that's a concern. A lot of people don't realize that. Okay? But again, if that's what you want to do, just know all the facts on the table, before you make these crucial kinds of decisions. Okay? Another option, and I'm drawing to a close pretty soon, is what they call green options. Okay? Green options. And trust me, I was not taught this in rabbinical school because I don't even think it existed yet. And I love being out in the Pacific Northwest because we're so incredibly in tune with the land and open to interconnectedness. We're more than just people. We are part of a much greater whole. Okay? Most green options, one of the main purposes is to reduce the carbon footprint of the whole burial process and to reduce the environmental impact of burial. So one green option is to literally, you're buried in a mushroom suit. I don't know, how many of you heard of this? Okay, so good. So a lot of you know what this is. This is absolutely intriguing. Okay, it's intriguing. The mushrooms, go through the whole chemical process, and your body is consumed, okay? But the toxins that may be in your body, okay, they're also transformed. So you're not polluting the environment. You're returning to the environment. Okay? This may be a little pricey, but I imagine the longer that this is an option, the price will come down, the price will come down. Okay? And then it's just a question of where you want to be, your remains to be decomposing. Yeah, exactly.
Composted.
Yeah, and composting, I'm glad you brought that up because we've got mushrooms over here. There's composting over there. And you may think, what? Are you crazy? You know, what are you talking, you're going to compost a body? I think a softer word is terramation.
What?
Yeah, terramation. Yep. Hey, I Googled it. Okay, it's real.
It must be
It's
right.
real. No, trust me. It's
Okay, Dr. Google.
yeah. No. I'm not just throwing this out. It's either composting or terramation. They both give you the same story. This was first legal in Washington State. It is now legal in Oregon. Pretty much what you do is you place the body in a container, and in that container are wood chips, straw, and alfalfa. And then time. Because what happens is a chemical reaction. It takes about 4 to 7 weeks. This chemical reaction raises the temperature up significantly. But through that process, bacteria, viruses, pathogens, it's all killed off. Okay? And they actually have to test it before you use this. You have to get it formally tested to make sure that you're not inadvertently putting anything that's dangerous or unhealthy into the earth. Okay?
Think carefully about your last meal.
Well, right. Seriously, what are you going to do with it? Because what you do, what you get is you get about 250 pounds of compost when this is all said and done. It does not smell. Okay, you're going to think, what does it smell like? It does not smell like manure. It's not like that. If
Depends on what you ate.
No. I'm not making this up. If you took a look at it, you wouldn't, and you didn't know what it was, you would not jump to the conclusion that that was a human being.
Of course not.
Okay, because it tends to be like an auburn colored or a brown colored, almost like a fine earth. But thinner. Yeah, it's not like chunky or anything, it's thinner.
DNA tests been done on this so we can find bodies or something to keep people out? I don't know that I like this idea.
Well,
Not to Q&A yet.
yeah, we're not, that's good, no, that's a good question.
Hold the thought.
That's a good question,
Interesting
Okay.
option.
Yeah, so you get the 250 pounds of the remains, and then it's up to you on how you want to use it. Okay, you can just return it to the earth, or you can, if you're a fan of tending your flowers, plants on your front lawn, your back lawn, you can use it as fertilizer. Okay, you can insert joke here on whether you want to use it for fertilizer or for food. That's up to you. That's up to you. Okay. And again, this is another alternative. So, you know, as you get closer and you start thinking about, okay, what is that burial going to look like? Keep in mind, you have more options than you ever thought you had. Okay? And that hopefully will lead to some really good conversations around the table. All right? Okay, so thank you.
Wow. I have to follow that. I'm just thinking about the Posen Memorial Garden.
Nice.
Well, I'm allergic to mushrooms, so I can't become a mushroom. I became a rabbi because of Jewish death. Some of you have heard this from me before, but there are added layers to this. So I begin first when I was in 6th grade when my grandfather died. I was 11. It was my first experience. I was very close with my maternal grandfather, my Zadie, and he passed away, and I fell in love with Jewish grief. Not guilt, but Jewish grief. Because the rituals that were there, I saw them heal my family and bring my family together, and they healed me. So I was 11 then. At 25, my father passed away, and I saw Jewish rituals of grief tear my family apart. And I was in rabbinical school. And so I had this moment of thinking about what do Jewish grief rituals give and what can they take and what is the power of explaining them in those moments. I then fast forward to this past December where I rushed home to Michigan, where my uncle, my mom has 2 sisters, her middle sister's husband had frontotemporal dementia, did not have an advance directive, and spent 11 days by his bedside with his family, trying to guide them as both rabbi and niece, and wishing he had an advanced medical directive so that we could move forward. My father did have one. I have one. My father's was very helpful. And then I've just returned. I returned, midnight Tuesday night, Wednesday morning from being back in Michigan for my 97-year-old grandma-in-law, sort of. I don't know how to explain it. She's like a bonus aunt who had all the plans worked out, but considered location of burial over a place that would have responded. So she died on a Saturday afternoon. She picked a place across from the mall because she figured her family would go visit her. But it wasn't a Jewish cemetery, and they didn't call back till Monday morning. So the family, okay. So I'm here in this moment thinking about the value of Jewish ritual and the way that we approach death and mourning and grief in all of these places. I've seen the healing. I've seen the heartache personally, and then standing in that space wanting to bring her to Portland because I could get her buried faster this past weekend because of what that looks like. So I'm here to talk about what are Jewish rituals of mourning from the moment of death primarily through that first year. And this is why I am a rabbi. I fell in love with Judaism because I walked this journey with my family, and it was so powerful. And even when it felt broken, it was still there for me. So let's talk about those moments when our loved one passes away, or even think about it if you want in ourselves. I think often we're afraid to think about ourselves dying, but as Rabbi Stone started, it's going to happen. So we might as well think about it and at least have that preparation. So our tradition teaches us that from the moment that we pass away, we are in a space of being cared for. Just like in a birth, when a baby is born, it can't do anything for itself. So too in that moment, both the mate or meta, the person who has passed, and their family member are considered in a space of needing to be cared for. The first way that happens is for the mate or meta, the person who's passed, being cared for with shmirah and tahara, and we've spoken about this before, caring for the body. Before then, and there'll be time to talk a little bit about this, I think, after, about what does it look like to think about your own death and ways of doing that. And we have multiple people in our community that work as death doulas, et cetera. So I want to just make sure that you're holding that word in your head. When we pass, our bodies are never left on their own. And so to think about, do you want to have a ritual washing? Just like when we're born at the end of our lives as well, we go through that. You have to ask for it. Many people think, oh, I don't need that, or, oh, that's weird. But there's some kind of care that comes into, especially if it's a medical death and you're in a hospital or you're in a space where you haven't been able to care for yourself. There is a space of wanting that purification ritual and that tender, gentle care of our bodies. And then, as Rabbi Barry said about the tachrichin, having our garments put on, the mourners who are there are also in a space of being cared for. So we have this category called aninut, which is you're in between. It's like a liminal moment. You're not a mourner because burial hasn't happened yet, and burial is the moment where we become mourners. And at the same time, our tradition teaches us that we're fragile and that there is gentleness that's needed both with the person who has passed and with ourselves. And when we think about emotion that comes in that space, it's important to call out that there are a lot of emotions, and sometimes we want to care for ourselves, and sometimes we can't do those basic things. I remember when my dad died, I was supposed to be going back to rabbinical school. I had no clothes. I had no comfy clothes. So my family went out and bought me like millions of sweatpants so that I would have some. I just wanted to be cozy. Those are the things that we think about if you're surrounding a mourner. That's the aninut we care for. Our tradition does tell us that while we may want to wait for loved ones to come in town, we should rush to do a mitzvah. And that means just like a bris, when a child or a baby naming is supposed to be early on the 8th day, a burial is supposed to be as soon as possible as well, because it's about that honoring of that moment and that process. I like to think that the rabbis of old were the most brilliantly in tune in this moment. Not every moment, I want to be clear. They got a lot wrong. But when it comes to death and this moment, they were so in tune with the notion that prolonging burial prolongs the ability to grieve. Doing that can cause harm. And so that is part of why our tradition says we rush to do the burial, because we are not able to do our mourning practices until the body has been laid to rest in its final resting place. And there are multiple ways of doing that, although 4 to 7 weeks sounds a little bit long for the composition to happen. So I'm not a gardener. I kill everything I try to grow. I'm curious about what that might look like as I...
Some of the things in this building are actually fake. Don't be too impressed.
I thought you blessed them.
If only.
So we look at this. So let's talk about the first moments that we have. So once burial happens, and this is, so cemetery burial happens. Jewish mourners are considered to be the 7. Mother, if it's the person who's passed is your mother, father, sister, brother, son, daughter, spouse, or partner, I would add. Those are the mourners in our traditional sense. Now, I'm going to leave that to you to decide if you're a mourner, or I felt like a mourner for my grandfather, and I was given opportunities to be there. So that's up to you and your family. Once you get to that space, once the body has been interned in the ground and earth has been replaced, that is the moment of transition where those who are living become mourners. Now, here's something to think about when we talk about advanced directives and also ethical wills and planning. Do you want a shiva? Do you want your family to sit for 7 days? So our tradition says the first 7 days are shiva. Those are intense period of mourning, and there's rituals that go with that. You don't shave, makeup, cover the mirrors, and you can do anything and everything in there. There's no police in that, but it's important to honor the person. So my grandfather wanted his 7 a.m. service at his house every day after he died. My grandmother hated mornings and refused to leave her room till everyone left. So when my grandmother died, we didn't do morning services because we all wanted to sleep in, and I really appreciated her letting us know that. So it's, again, about what honors the person who you're honoring and what are your own needs. So those 7 days are the intense period of mourning. They're considered a part of also this period called shloshim. So the first 7 days, Judaism says you're in this intense grief. You shouldn't work. You shouldn't cook. Give yourself the freedom to feel, which in our world is so hard to do because it's so easy to put it off to the side and go back in, or I'll grieve, I don't want to. Judaism says, no. The healthy thing to do is be here in this moment, sit in it, but it says don't get stuck. because the last day of Shiva, that seventh day, is only a few hours. And then you get up and you're supposed to slowly start to enter the world. And you have 30 days of holding both those intense grief rituals, but also being able to slowly re-enter, go to work, put on, if you want, makeup, or take the covers off the mirrors. There are traditions about not shaving for an entire year or whatever space you're in, but those 30 days are sort of like a toe in the water back into the world. When we leave a burial site, the words that are traditionally said are "Hamakom yanachem etchem b'toch sha'ar avalei Tzion v'Yerushalayim." May the one, the place, comfort you with all the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. We say this in a moment just as a bride and groom leave the chuppah in this new space, and they've entered a world as a changed entity. When we say that at the graveside, we're actually welcoming the mourners back into society, marking a change. Just like when we get married, there's Sheva Brachot, 7 days of blessing, there's 7 days of Shiva. The first year after somebody gets married are supposed to have honey on the challah, the sweetness. This first year mirrors that as well, because we are changed in every moment of our lives. So the 30 days give us a toe in the water. Saying Kaddish. So here's like a big one that I hear a lot. We are commanded, required, invited, choose the word that feels right for you, to say the mourner's Kaddish 3 times a day, or not, for that first 11 months following a loss. The Kaddish was put there for something to do. And I think that if you look at our traditional text, it's there because it reminds us that every day we'll have grief in it, and to have something steady there to remind you of that change is psychologically important in order to own this moment and to be healthy as we move forward. If saying Kaddish doesn't work for you, I think that the intent of that, in my mind, is do something every day that allows you to recognize the process that you're in. So you're not traditionally supposed to listen to live music in your first year. That's like the more traditional observance. But if I tried to do that for my father, and it kept me from my family because all they wanted to do was get together and go see my cousin's band. That wasn't helpful for me to hold that. So I found a different thing every day I could do to honor my father's memory. I think that the import of our tradition is that this first year requires of us each day and in each moment to hold space to recognize that we are different, that we have changed, that we are grieving and growing, and not to hide from it. And that's also why no matter what stage, whether it's the first year or beyond, we have Yizkor. So throughout the year, there are times that we gather together: Pasach, Shavuot, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, Yom Kippur, where, I got them all right?
I think you did.
Where we gather, and those are the times where we say Yizkor, the memorial service. There are some who say that first one, whatever it is, if it's so close to when you lost your loved one, you don't have to go. And that's fair because it's very intense. I still cry. I cry even more, I think, the older I get and the further out. I'm 16, it'll be 16 years this summer since my father passed. It's there to remind us that throughout the year, even if we're not in our intense grief, even if we're 16 years out or 20 years or 30 years, we're still different. And that's the beauty of our tradition, that we mark these moments and we have the ability to live in it. And besides Yizkor and those moments, there's also this tradition of an unveiling. So yeah, you gotta mark the land. That's law by the state. You gotta say if there's a body there, right? In the garden too, if you compost yourself. I have a curiosity. Someone's going to have to look that. No? Yeah, this may be new law. But, I mean, I would like a memorial garden then. So, because the notion is, as Jews, that we mark space, that there's somewhere to go back to. And if you look at stones, I happen to spend a lot of time in the Neve Tzedek and the Avai Shalom cemeteries, and I've been to a lot of, you can see the weather-worn stones. You can see where the wind and the rain and dust have worn that stone. Our bodies are dust to dust, but that marking place, however we choose to be, reminds us that a life was there, and because of that, we are forever changed. And so when we think about that first year after a loss, and when we think about what Jewish grief and mourning looks like, I think it's as much about giving ourselves time and space to own and be present as it is of reminding us as a community that it's our responsibility also to know. That's why we have Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. That's why we have announcements that go out. So-and-so has passed. That's why there's obituaries and papers all across the country that are not, because we have to know so we can reach out and hold one another and be present with one another. And it's okay to live in that grief and walk through it as long as we're doing it with one another and finding these ways to move forward in our moment in time. And our tradition, I think, is so rich and so spot on with requiring actual presence in our grief. It's too easy to let it go or to think that we can move it. And our tradition says, no, we are human and we have to have those moments. So,
Human time.
yay Jews, yay,
Yay,
yay
Jews.
death.
Yay, death.
It won't kill you to plan for it. Also, if you prepay and you get miles,
Oy, 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 oy,
you can go
oy.
on a trip.
Miles. Good Lord. That's actually not a bad idea. You could buy a plot right now and dance on your own grave.
It's the only land you can own outright in some places.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Well,
We're going to get into some questions
But
now.
one thing real quick. Rabbi Posen, thank you so much for making reference to a death doula. You know, someone that can be a guide for the person that is passing away, but also for family and friends. Laura Fendel is a death doula.
We have two of them here.
And I was going to say,
Yeah.
who else, if there is...
Rachel Crawford is also a
So
death
please,
doula
yeah,
here
we
in the
want to
room.
recognize you for the work that
So
you're doing.
Thank
you.
It's a very exciting thing. Yes,
Yep.
thank you.
Great. Thank you to all four rabbis. Let's give them a round of applause. It was very informative. I had a friend that just died in July, and he was composted in Vancouver because it wasn't legal then in Oregon. But he's in people's friends' gardens all around Southeast Portland, as was his wish, back to earth, as it were. At this point, before the Q&A, and I'll run around and do Phil Donahue with the mic. That's a really old reference for the young people here. And when you get the mic, just keep it about 6 inches from your mouth so we can hear you loud and clear. At this point, I want to introduce Sam Young, who's the Compassion and Choices Managing Director of Planned Giving and Strategic Advisor. Let's give a round of applause to Sam.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here to learn together. And this is a milestone for a couple of reasons. This is the first in-person thing I'm doing, and it feels a little weird not being on Zoom, so I'm trying to negotiate my notes, so bear with me. And it's really relevant for me, and I spoke to Rabbi Stone this afternoon. I lost my mother about a month ago, and this is relevant to all of us. So I just want to tell you a little bit about compassion and choices. Oh, thank you. I want to tell you a little bit about compassion and choices, and then we have a very special treat for all of you that my colleague's going to share. Compassion and Choices is the largest and oldest nonprofit organization focused on expanding choices and improving end-of-life care through advocacy and education. Our mission states that we envision a society that affirms life and accepts the inevitability of death, embraces expanded options for compassionate dying, and empowers everyone to choose end-of-life care that reflects their values, priorities, and beliefs. And that's what really speaks to me. We have 450,000 supporters and are active in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., Guam, and Puerto Rico. Our objective is to provide you with useful information that allows you to create the legacy you desire. We have many resources available at our website, and we have some materials in the back at compassionatechoices.org, including no-cost tools to prepare a will, advance directive, power of attorney, and even a confidential consultation line. It's all there for you if you want guidance and help to do it. Our community engagement efforts are designed to meet people where they are regarding planning and having informed discussions about end-of-life care. It's a tough topic, but necessary, because end-of-life is something we will all have to face. Having tools to do that can only help a difficult situation. That is why we lead our efforts with planning equals peace, and a lack of planning is hazardous to your health and wealth, as Rabbi Stone noted earlier. Incorporating your healthcare wishes and what happens to your assets is the best way to ensure the legacy you want to leave. Making these plans is the most loving thing you can do for your family and your loved ones. We want to empower all communities for their end-of-life journey and are here to be your partner. Rabbi Stone states in her book, existence embraces both life and death, and in a way, death is the test of the meaning of life. And that's what we want to embrace and make sure that you have the end that you want to have. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Zena, who is the Compassion and Choices Faith Engagement Manager, to present a very special award to Rabbi Stone. Zena?
And Sam, I'm going to invite you back up here to take our award out of the box. I have presented an award before, and I'm a little clumsy and dropped the beautiful award, so I do not want that to happen today. But yes, that's it. So about a year ago, I started working at Compassion and Choices, and I was given a list of faith leaders that I needed to meet with who have done important work in our movement. And at the top of the list was Rabbi Stone. And when I connected with her, she was so gracious and generous with her time. And I also saw very quickly that her brilliance is rooted not just in intellect, but also in profound care and compassion. And what she knows and what she teaches comes from deep love. And so I have been grateful for every time that I've gotten to speak with her. And she reminds us that death and dying is a sacred and holy topic to be approached with care. So each year, Compassion and Choices gives an award to a faith leader dedicated to improving end-of-life care and options for all. So it wasn't a surprise to me that when there was a nationwide call for nominations, Rabbi Stone was once again at the very top of the list. And this award is named after the civil rights leader and end-of-life option advocate, Reverend Dr. Paul Smith. And like Dr. Paul Smith, Rabbi Stone is a trailblazing faith leader, and she's been an advocate for end-of-life care and options for over 30 years. And both Sam and I have read her book, and there's going to be a little segment in the magazine about her book, this Compassion and Choices magazine. But there's a quote in there where she writes, "You will continue to teach those around you until your last moments, and possibly even after, in ways that you cannot fully comprehend or control, but simply by continuing to be who you are." And we are so grateful for the ways that you have taught us about living well and also about dying well. So we are so excited to present this award to you.
Say one thing. And Rabbi Stone pointed out something else to us today is, and I'm quoting, she said, Portland is ground zero for the end-of-life movement. The first medical aid and dying law was passed in Oregon and continues to be...
Oregon did.
Oregon, sorry.
Gone.
Okay, I'm from New Jersey. But I just want to say that this is not only special for Rabbi Stone, but this is also special because this represents the movement, and Rabbi Stone has been a part of that from the beginning. Rabbi Stone, I invite you to say something, please.
I'm going to use my mic.
Yes,
And
please.
go on because we talked about so many things in the first round, and I feel like
One of the things that might be an elephant in the room is that we are not in control of so much about how we die, right? I think it's really important for us to do everything we can, but we are not in control of the way we die in at least two ways that I think is really, it's really worth considering for every one of us here in the room and everybody you know who would rather not consider it. One of those ways is that in our society, we have this sense that we should do everything we can to help a body keep breathing. And it's not about quality of life at some point. It's simply about a body of someone you love and you don't want to let it go. Up until very recently, that wasn't an option. Now that we can throw lots of money and technology at the problem, we want to pretend that we can stave off the inevitable. It gives us more room to stall before we have to stand up and accept, or collapse on the floor and accept, that someone we love is dying. Rather than let your loved ones struggle with that idea, are we able ourselves to do the spiritual work that will allow us to be graceful when the toys are being taken away? And in that way to help our loved ones to carry out wishes that will be realistic. And in that way, being realistic is a way of being compassionate. Not to entertain denial, not to pretend. So if you live in a family where denial and pretending are a way of life, it's a pretty big deal to try to change that practice when you get close to death, which is why I think it's really important for us to start thinking about changing it before then. If you've never been to a death cafe, you might try one. If you don't think you can just have the conversation, read Atul Gawande's book, Being Mortal, and stop assuming you know what your parents want, right? Or that your children know what you haven't said. There's a way in which we don't want to face death, and so we let people try, in the health professions, try to help set up a barrier. Just keep them alive another day, another week. Maybe they'll get better. The second reality is the entire healthcare system is geared to make it as gentle as possible for you. But the reality is that pulling out all the stops to keep an elderly person alive are brutal. They're not gentle. They're not kind on the body. They bring a kind of humiliation and desecration of the physical body that are at odds with what our tradition would teach us is respect for life and for the end of life. Jewish tradition teaches us that life is the ultimate blessing. But the great Rabbi Meir of the Talmud said that ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, to love another as you love yourself, to treat another with the care you want yourself, means that you must guarantee for others a good death. Time for questions?
Yes, let's raise your hand if you have a question or a comment.